And when I got to the end of my sort of quickly prepared notes, I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying over your head. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank of what was then the GH group of countries to say unequivocally, with no reservation, UFOs are real.
That feels amazing to hear you say that. Thank you. I've wanted to hear you say that face to face as much as possible with this virtual network. And wow, that. With that being said, when you said different star systems, did they tell you where?
No, he didn't say where. These are the kinds of things I've been studying ever since.
Yeah, and do you think there could be? Do you have any connections or anything around Saturn?
Say again?
Anything around Saturn, like Iapetus or Mimas? Any strange activity around there?
I can't remember all these things. I think one of Saturn's moons is inhabited, but a lot of. I'm sure that most of our planets in our solar system are with people who look very much like us, and it raises the question as if we're maybe cousins at some stage. And I wouldn't be surprised. And because there's a lot of difference in how these beings look. You have a short gray, for example, which is very, very short, and long, spindly arms and legs, and a big head and big eyes, and so on. And then you get somebody like Valiant Thor, who looks like the kind of guy you'd want your daughter to bring home if she was bringing somebody home for dinner. Gorgeous looking guy, you know, and an IQ of 1200. Never heard of such a thing. And so there's a lot of difference between them, and I know from experience that there are many, many different species. I know there are a lot of species now, but didn't always think so. And soon after I went public, Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, came to our place for dinner, and he started giving me the gears about the assumed landing at what's the name of the place? Anyway,
You talking about the moon?
no, I gave him the gears because he was kidding, and then he, without blinking an eyelash, he said, "How many species do you think there are?" And I said, "Somewhere between 2 and 12." He said, "Yes, that's what I think too." Well, of course, we were both a way off base because I've met a retired United States sergeant whose job it was to retrieve vehicles from various places. And he had a book prepared by the United States Army with 54 different species in it. In other words, 54 different kinds of vehicles that he might have to be able to cope with when he and others were going out to retrieve these vehicles, whether they crashed or were shot down from the other.
Now, did he talk about the different types of beings that would be equipped to fly these craft, or any more details on the actual 54 species?
No, I haven't talked to him a lot. You know, he's written a book and he's got some fascinating things in it, including that he let one of them go, and it was a wonder he wasn't court-martialed, but he managed to get away with it because he was so valuable. And you know, he was an extraordinary fellow, but there are all kinds of extraordinary fellows if you start reading the literature. And there are dozens of good books with all kinds of experiences and talking about different kinds of species and where they come from. And those from the Galactic Federation, for example, are what we call representatives of the light. There are people who believe in our creator God, and they call them various things: the source, the one, the forever, different names, but you get right down to it. It's what we call God. And then you have one or two species which are very questionable. And I think it's been pretty well assumed, and I've seen one or two reports of briefings to presidents, and they say that just about all of the species are benign, are friends, but there are one or two that are questionable. And it's the one or two that are questionable that I think that we have to worry about at the present time.
Are they controlling things from a top-down situation like a pyramid? Those species.
There's so many pyramids when you get to the Cabal. It would look like a farm of pyramids. And, I think the money mafias, I call them, who are just being exposed recently as things different than they appear. They have accumulated, in fact, hundreds of trillions of dollars at our expense over the years. They have more power than the President of the United States. And so that's a pyramid. And then you have the so-called alternate government of the United States, one that was over and above the government. And President Clinton said there is a government within a government, and I don't control it. Imagine the President of the United States not knowing what the forces under his command, presumably under his command, were doing. And they wouldn't tell him. And that's been the situation since Eisenhower. Eisenhower gave us that famous speech warning us about what was happening. But like prophets in most countries, he wasn't taken seriously. And we just let them get away with what they were doing. And what they have done in the last 70 years is just absolutely incredible.
We go back 70 years, and I think of the Roswell incident, and I think a lot of nuclear testing that was going on at that point. And it seems like something happened, and you brought up the 70 years. So let's talk about it. What happened?
Well, it was really the Roswell crash that triggered the interest. The Navy had already recovered a craft from the South Pacific. And my friend Paula Harris is just releasing a book talking about a crash in 1945, just after the first atomic bomb was put off. And so it wasn't really the beginning, but it was the beginning of the major interest. And so it was after the Roswell crash, and they recovered one of the craft. There were two crashes there. And after they had recovered one of them in sufficient shape that they could start back engineering it, that's when the interest really started. And so they started, and that's when President Truman set up the MJ-12, Mystic 12, to take control of the whole subject, and with power to only tell anybody that they wanted to tell, or more precisely, that they had a need to know, and that did not include presidents. And so that's where the thing took off. These, of course, the people from the Operation Paperclip were in right from the beginning, and they moved the operation to western U.S. so that it would be out of sight of the politicians and the major newspapers, and started working underground. One of one of the people who worked out there, Dr. Wolf, who worked in both areas, 51 and S4, said that the underground facilities were equal to about Rhode Island and growing all the time. And that gives you an idea of the size of the operation and the cost of the operation, about which Congress knew nothing. And it's been going on right up to this day. So lots of things have been going on that most people are totally unaware of. And, I think to their peril, really.
Yeah, and you go back to the Project Paperclip, and they brought in scientists and engineers, very intelligent people, and then they got involved with large corporations and alphabet groups, etc. So with that being said, now we've got what appears to be extraterrestrials that are working with maybe the Nazis. I mean, were they working with the Nazis during World War II and before? And were they making contact with them?
Ken Laston was written 2 or 3 books on these subjects. He says that that there's one species and they're sort of gray puppets who were working with the Nazis before and during World War II, and have been working with them ever since. They're the ones that are the threat, I think, and the ones behind the New World Order and the operation of building a new government of the world, unelected, not responsible to anyone except themselves and for their own best interests. And they're the ones that are also dedicated to depopulation. And on the depopulation thing, the good figures that they want to reduce the population of the world by as much as 90%. I don't know if it's 90% or 50%, but I do say, and I said in the YouTube that I created and started distributing just a few days ago, that a few white supremacists do not have the power to decide who is going to die and who isn't. I mean, who gave them the authority to say that I'm going to die and you're not, or vice versa? Or that so-and-so senator who was trying to reveal what they were doing should die, or a black leader, or anyone. And yet they have built an apparatus where they have us all fingered, where they know everything that you say and write and do. And it's getting worse all the time. And one of the new things is this 5G, the 5th generation of the communications, which I'm told really duplicates some capacity they already have, but gives them more to trace an individual anywhere. And ultimately, to send us little electrical shock down through their phone. And there are other ways that they have set up to sort of get us in the end. In addition to the sort of midterm things that are going on, like geoengineering and the HAARP and the electronic fence that they've been building. And we have just about anywhere you turn, they've got something set up that's going to do you harm. And I've watched out my window, there are 4 little planes that take off from the local island airport. They start before sunrise, and they go until after sunset, 7 days a week. Doesn't matter if it's a holiday or not. They just keep going and taking that stuff up there and spewing it out. And they use a nozzle that was developed for the Vietnamese War, for defoliating, and they put out something that allegedly contains nanoparticles, aluminum, barium, and strontium. These things are so small that they go right through your bloodstream to your head. And I have in my second last book a list of some of the diseases that they cause. And it's a wide list. It's including Alzheimer's and Lou Gehrig's disease and all of these terrible things that they cause, and autism. The autism incidence is going way up, skyrocketing. And that's coming from this poison from the air. They're poisoning the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the soil where we grow our food.
Do you think that the Morgellons might have a connection to some type of nanotech that they could be spraying from the air?
I believe so, yes. And I have a friend who suffered terribly from that. And she's absolutely convinced that's where it came from.
It's almost like they're trying to inject a artificial life. I shouldn't call it artificial life, but like a mechanical life, a synthetic life into an organic life form, and maybe merging it and turning them into an antenna of sorts. I have so many questions about the Morgellons, but that is just so bizarre. And you brought up the rise of autism. Huge increase. Now it's, I think, 1 out of every 55, but they diagnose somebody with it. And that's, you can get into that debate as well. But one of the things that's linked, I guess you could say, the geoengineering. I hadn't really thought about that as much before. I thought about the geoengineering connected to Alzheimer's and other things, possibly if they're spraying all that aluminum in the air, you're going to be breathing it in. So, geez. So
something nobody talked about is the effect it may have on wildfires. Everything is saturated with little nanoparticles of aluminum. And they're, as you know, very combustible, and the burn is very high all temperature and so on. And I think it probably has a very major impact on the incidence and the ferocity of the wildfires.
I agree. And I've also wondered if at the higher elevations, there's a lot of beetle kill, if the genetic modifications of the atmosphere could help with the beetle kill, essentially make the trees weaker so the beetles can, they'll attack the immunity of the trees themselves. And with the different weather patterns, you can certainly see that the forests are hurting. Now, Paul, are these programs connected? Let's go back for a minute. You said the gray puppets. And that immediately made me think of the grays and the drone. Like, are they biological drones? Is that what you think these grays are?
I think the grays are the most difficult group to figure out, because there are species within species. I mean, and you can say that, like the United States today is a deeply divided country. And so there are species who are on one side and species who are on another side. And I've seen some work done by the Farsight Institute, for example, who say that the grays are the good guys. But there are some that are working, the reptilians and the Nazis, who are not the good guys. And many of them are drones, as you know, many of them are just robots. but there are some that aren't. And you raised an interesting point too, though, that they're starting to try and develop whatever, I don't know what you want to call them, beings that are half human and half artificial. And in my opinion, that is grotesque. Absolutely, totally grotesque. And why they should want to do that, I don't know, except they're such a perverse lot. And I think this was first reported by the commander of the American group who went to Serpo in the 1960s. But they finally got a chance to look at the hospital there and see some of the things that were being done. And a lot of them